Well, you can push. I'll use this over here.
Yeah. We ready? Okay. Welcome to Gitdigger. I am Wick. Oh, this is really cool. Anybody go to DEF CON? Everybody know the Pawn Star show?
Anyone ever seen Pawn Stars?
Okay. Rob and I found ourselves there at DEF CON before we gave our talk. And they had a console that you could walk up to. You could take a picture of yourself and then choose where you wanted to email it, Facebook it, or tweet it out. So I went up, took a picture. I wanna tweet this. Please enter your username and password. Like, yeah, I don't think so.
USB ports on the back.
Yep, open one little cable running from the wall into the back of this device. I don't know why we left that in there. It's just cool. So I did all the research for this job. Yes, and all the work. So if you don't like this, I'm just the guy up here with Mubix.
Yeah, so we weren't really the first to create a word list, right? Like, there are plenty of word lists out there. The difference is that there aren't that many word lists for anything but passwords. So, great word list. So we also weren't the first to go digging around for other types of word lists, specifically for like forced browsing for websites. So SVN-Digger is kind of the project that kicked this whole thing off. So we didn't start this, we didn't do it, we aren't participants of it. But this gentleman from Mavatuna Security basically went through a bunch of SVN repositories, pulled out all of the URLs in different word lists and passwords and things that he found interesting, and made a word list available. So,
Go back.
Go ahead.
The QR codes are actually links to the stuff we're talking about. They're safe. I created them, not him. Good to go. You'll see them throughout.
So if it's easier if you're in the audience to snap a quick pic and use the QR code.
Or use a friend's phone to snap a quick pic, just in case.
So we wanted to do kind of the same thing, and I'll show you how that kind of started initially, but Google's a little mean about scraping their stuff.
So this is how it started. PassV posted a link at 2 in the morning to SVN-Digger. I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't know anybody who was doing that. Mubix said that's awesome. Those 2 words, that's the only reason he's up here right now.
That's all of my work done.
Yes. So I was like, 2 in the morning, I scrape websites all the time. I'll start scraping it. I'll have it done in 30 minutes. I'll go to bed, wake up, and all will be well. So I guess I gotta hit the button. So this is a I can do this 30-minute solution at 2 in the morning when I'm already half asleep.
We've all had those instances, right, where you go and find a problem, you're like, I can get this done. 20 minutes, knock it out. How does that usually work out?
Yeah, just wait. So the first thing I did was I went to the most frequent website on GitHub where they list the most forked, most starred, and they listed them by software. So I figured, okay, I'll go through, I'll grab all of these, and I'll get all the most popular stuff. So a little bit of Python, scraping the web page, dumping the projects into an SQLite database, and then just set my computer cloning and went to bed. So now that I have the data, I need to create some word lists. So I took the repositories, I did an os.walk on all the files and folders, I did all kinds of bash foo to pull out usernames, emails, passwords. It took about 10 hours per 1 day's worth of grepping just to sit there.
After you slept, so not inclusive.
Yes.
So this is 10 hours of work.
Yes. So eventually I've got the word lists. I've got some cool stuff. It took about 17 hours, manual kung fu. And one of the problems that I ran into, I'm doing this. I'm like, okay, well, how can I make this a little faster? I'm going to do it. Might as well try and make it a little better. So I found this Betterwalk, and they claim...
Creative name, right? Betterwalk.
Yes,
to
they claim that os.walk makes unnecessary API calls to tell whether something's a file or a folder or whatnot, and they blinded me with science. They gave some numbers, some speeds that I wasn't going to test. I was like, this sounds good.
I'll trust it.
Yeah, all I gotta do is change one line of code, Betterwalk instead of os.walk, and it worked. I didn't do a speed test.
True.
So the good news is I've got Wordlists. Everybody thought they were cool and useful. The bad news is I only have the top repositories. The SQLite transactions were incredibly slow. 17 hours of manual labor sucks for anything unless you're sleeping. And my hard drive was completely full. I could barely boot.
When do you get 17 hours of sleep?
After DEF CON, when you don't sleep at all. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. Let's get a little more serious. Let's upgrade how I can get this done.
So basically, everyone in the chat channel for Nova Hackers were like, hey, Wick, this is awesome. Keep doing this. Do it more. Use your time.
Yes.
It's awesome for us.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Otherwise, yeah. So my first thought is storage. How am I going to store this stuff? And somebody in Nova Hackers was like, oh, have you checked out Picasa? I was like, well, no. It's cheap. It's got built-in indexing, so I could have created a username and password, handed it out. Anybody could log in and hopefully not deleted my stuff. But search through it for interesting stuff. At the time that all this was going on, it was Windows only. I crashed it every time I tried to robocopy something to it. And it was incredibly slow because they encrypted everything on the upstream.
Why would you encrypt stuff? It's just annoying. Slow.
So the next option is, okay, I need a NAS. I want to put all my data in one spot. Awesome solution. Incredibly expensive. And trying to convince somebody to give me a NAS that can hold up to 40 terabytes is, yeah,
Come on, you
good
don't have 40
luck.
grand sitting around?
No, I do not. And I've already have 3 terabytes at this point. So my solution was multiple drives plugged in individually. I had to upgrade the database so the database knew what drive, what project was on. If I wanted to go back and search for anything, it was a nightmare. And then my kids would come down and then they'd swap the stickers and I wouldn't know what drive was what. It was hell.
This is all plugged into a USB hub, plugged into his computer. That's a unique problem to solve.
Yeah, trust me, it was. Okay, so now what I was doing is I was using Python to pretty much just wget all of this stuff. So naturally, after you do all this work, you find a much better way to do it and slap yourself in the forehead. So I didn't even think that GitHub had an API at the time. So I found it. This is the information that they return, which is kind of fuzzy up there, but they give you a nice login name, the ID, they tell you whether it's a fork or not, everything you want to know about this. And when you make the request, they give you like 1,000 repositories at a time for every one request you make. Okay, so now we need to get rid of SQLite because it sucks for anything large. So I went to MySQL because I know MySQL. I've had people go, why didn't you use Postgres? Well, I already had MySQL installed and I didn't feel like learning new syntax, so that's it. It might be faster, who knows, don't really care at this point. So now I gotta put everything together, all these different parts together. So I've upgraded a bunch of stuff. I've added a script to add random stuff to the database. The database was originally only like one table keeping track of everything. So now I've got a table and counts for everything. I keep track of the last seen repository so that when I query the API, I just get new stuff.
So this is constantly going, right? So
If you want to see it after the talk and we go out, it's running. I'll remote into it, and you can see all this stuff if you're into watching text scroll. But now the downloader goes out, queries the API, dumps the data into MySQL, and clones the repository. Now here's the processing. So I've got a processor that does a Betterwalk on the repository, generates the file names and database names, adds its account to the database. Then it goes through and greps for strings with username, password. There's a regex looking for static salts and for email addresses. And you have to go through all of that and manually clean it up and then dump it in the database. That is the worst part. I've wasted months doing that. But once all that's done, I can run a shell script and within 30 seconds have an updated word list set outputted and cloned to. The great part of this is I'm actually putting these word lists back up to GitHub. I have yet to cycle around to these word lists. That's what I may have to end after I do that. So the good news is I'm getting every single public repository. I am generating word lists in minutes once I have everything in the database, and I'm able to store the data over multiple hard drives. I know where it's at and whether I've gone through it at all.
Unless they've changed the stickies.
Yes. Then there's hell to pay. So carving out the data is horrible. It's extremely useful, but it takes forever to do. I've estimated that it's going to take about 30 terabytes to try and get close to everything, all the public data that GitHub is housing. So here's the big data joke. If you want to buy it, I'll sell it per terabyte, where you can drink every time you see the word big data. Now, it's time for the word list. I had this cool little picture. Rob and I had this cool little picture. Anybody see the Crudes? No, the little belt guy.
No one has kids?
We've given this talk like 3 times, and like nobody seemed to know what that was. So I put in a little simple Law and Order done for you.
All right, so why do we care, right? So this is my whole stick. Like, what he put all of this time into making these word lists, but who cares? What are they useful for? So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. So the files and directories are pretty obvious. If you know what files and directories are on a website, you can enforce those and find them, right, with better lists. You might find passwords.txt when you wouldn't actually have looked for passwords.txt originally, or there's no link to it anywhere, or backup database.backup, or whatever, right? So now that you have the more common word lists that are out there on GitHub at least, which is a pretty good set of repositories, you can start doing a more informed brute forcing. So password's obvious, right? If I know what the most used default password is, I can try that. Now, I definitely would always try password, right? But how many of you have ever been on a test, on a pen test or a web app assessment where you've tried logging into a foobar, other than the 2 people that have already seen us talk?
Multiple times.
Right? So I definitely try test, user, but foobar is the second most common. Would have never even thought about it. Usernames, Rails, SA, root, test, most of those are common.
This is totally different now, but this is just
colors and graphs.
Yes. An overview of how much information, how many passwords are in there versus how many unique passwords that are in there.
This is where we start getting the CEOs excited.
Yes.
So why is this relevant? Right? We've already talked about the word list. He already does, but how else can I use them? So the obvious stuff we've kind of already touched on is using it for forced browsing, simple default password list, the static salts. So anyone see that what happens when you have a Ruby on Rails salt listed in your GitHub repository that everyone uses? Real code execution. So if you get it clear text from, if you download a Ruby on Rails application from GitHub and don't change their salt that they have in that application, I can now have free remote code execution for you. So he pulls out all the static salts. So the number 22, the 22nd most common file in all of the lists was exception.php. Now I've been doing web apps for a long time, and I'll tell you what, I never looked for an exception.php in an application. But as it turns out, when I started looking for it after Wick did all this work, I found remote code execution from exception.php because it tried to load an exception.txt from something. Now I look for it every single time because of how freaking common it is. So file.php, another one that makes sense, but I never look for, right? You always look for upload.php or upload.whatever. I rarely look for upload. And password.txt. Are you serious? Your application has password.txt in its root? Awesome. This is out of, so 4,000th down the list, out of 19 million. That's how common this password.txt is. So that's how you do force browsing. Most people know. You just search to a site. SSH1 auth keys. Are you serious? You're storing SSH v1 auth keys on your application. And this is one of my, so this isn't very high on the list, but I thought it was just hilarious. NTLM SSO magic. Can anyone guess what magic is performed inside of that NTLM SSO? Just guess. Guesses? Other than you, since you've seen the stupid talk. It had a static username and password for the domain in that. So the magic was it logged in. All right, so that's, you know, what about real world stuff? So we already talked about the secret token stuff, secret salts, and I can't pronounce his last name. Joe released the information about the remote code execution with static salt, and he was nice enough before he released it to email everyone on GitHub that had these static salts.
I'm way too lazy for that, so tough. Not doing it.
So what about the not so obvious stuff? Before I go there, and you guys are already seen it, anyone can think of other things you can do with a word list like this in the real world? Other than you, since you've seen it. Okay. You guys are just tired? Alright, so we'll just go on. So, starting to parse every file from the Git. Since Git, when you pull it down, you clone the whole repository, even the history. So if you remove the secret token incorrectly, that is still in there somewhere because it has the whole history. Since it's a source code repository, you can revert stuff. Mass static code analysis. Imagine how cool it'd be to have like Veracode stuff push go on all of GitHub and say, I found a lot of vulnerabilities.
I can't wait to virus scan this whole thing.
Virus scanning. Parsing for .svn. Anyone know that GitHub allows you to convert a repository from SVN to GitHub? Well, up to like last year, they didn't remove the .svn directory from the repository. So you could find using passwords and other things inside of there. .gitignore. This is one of my favorite files. Gitignore tells Git not to ever commit something named this. So what do you think I'm going to start looking for on actual production sites? This, whatever's in there. Because normally it's like, here's where I store my configuration. Here's where I store my, my passwords for this application. Here's where I store my user database or SQLite database. So the developer never wants to commit that stuff because it's only specific for his deployment. So when it actually goes deployed, guess what I look for? That stuff. Other thing is, on GitHub, you can put empty _directory, an empty file called empty directory, and that's I don't know if that's standard or whatever, but a lot of people use it to because when you create a directory with Git, you can't actually commit anything until there's something in there. So what they do is put empty directory in there to store stuff. So with forced browsing, I can actually look in that empty directory. So if your web application does 403s or 400s or 404s, when I hit a directory that doesn't have, or I don't specifically specify a file in there, I can now use empty directory to find it. Same with .ds store stuff. Other fun stuff, how about running OCR on all the images? Guess what I found? An image where someone took a screenshot of the username and password field filled in with no stars over it. So grep out all the emails, which you're already doing.
I've had somebody request a copy of all the SQLite files for a project. They were going to go through them and see if there's any data, and I just did, I indexed all this stuff. So I just did a locate star.db and then removed all the thumb.db. I think I hit 62,000 files and went, yeah, you're just going to have to send me a drive. This is going to get kind of big.
So list of all the .text files for information gathering. Stop your giving them ideas. That's it.
And now I've created a mini version of this tool. It's on my GitHub. So that it's Python, it assumes you have Git installed on the box and it's in your search path. You can type in a username, it'll automatically go out, it's multi-threaded, so it'll just rape all their public repositories and automatically do what I'm doing and generate 2 word lists with all the files and the frequencies and all the directory names in the frequencies. And I gave it out to a couple people that do pen tests and they just love it.
So, word of warning, he has a 14.4 connection, so GitHub doesn't even notice him.
Not quite that bad.
Okay, 76.6.
Yes.
Whatever. If you try this with your fiber, your Verizon Fios, they may get a little pissed off. This is like really fast.
I was banned once, and then I was banned a second time via like my whole area was banned from GitHub because I was doing this. Because I have a dynamic IP address. Oh, you're going to ban me? I got to switch my IP address. You're going to change my account? I'll just get a new account. And then after a month, there was like nobody in my area from my ISP could use GitHub. But I haven't gotten any emails, no nothing. So I've heard through the grapevine that there's some magic number. And if you clone that many repositories within a specific amount of time, then they just ban you and your whole area for a while. There's another project. You want to mention it? There's another project. I forget who's doing it.
Keynote? Anyone ever heard of them?
Yeah, I feel kind of bad because I never have.
Okay.
They created a tool that you could take your Ruby on Rails session token or key and put it in and click a magic button and they'll tell you whether it's public information or not. And if it wasn't, if it wasn't, then it is now because it's in their database. But no, I gave them 23,000 files to help kickstart that thing. They pulled the tokens out of.
So what you're doing is giving them the session, the temporary session, not your real token. And they're telling you if they can crack it into code execution. So if you think that maybe your applications inside of your network are using these, you can very quickly say, hey, is this a real application? Yes, I will take my current session cookie, no matter what it is, logged in or not, take it over to Keynote's site, put it in, and ask them if it's a known token or not, which is very useful for both pen testers and defenders.
And about the time when all this stuff was calculated, because we gave this talk at DEF CON, I had about 750,000 repositories, and there's 10 terabytes of data. I now have a NAS that will hold up to 50 terabytes of data, and I've got 1 million repositories, and my database knows about 7 million.
Cool stuff.
Any questions or time's up?
All right.
download all the things.
We are done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.